It's hard to believe 10 years ago this week, a little Sarasota girl was abducted at a car wash, sparking a search that captured the attention of the entire country. Surveillance video caught the moment that 11-year-old Carlie Brucia was grabbed by a stranger, and after a massive manhunt, it was discovered that she had been raped.
The words you just heard are more than just a headline. They tell the story of a little girl who never made it home, and a town that watched its innocence disappear. On February 1st, 2004, 11-year-old Carlie Brucia was walking home from a friend's house. She didn't run, she didn't scream, she simply vanished. What followed was a desperate manhunt, a nation watching in horror, and a discovery in the woods that would break hearts across America. This is the real and haunting story of Carlie Brucia. It was February 1st, 2004, a Sunday, and for most people in Sarasota, Florida, it was a typical weekend afternoon. Families were preparing for the Super Bowl that evening. Stores were busy, living rooms were filled with snacks and chatter, and the streets were still quiet before the kickoff. For 11-year-old Carlie Brucia, the day had started like any other. She had spent the afternoon at a friend's house just a short distance from her home. Carlie was known to be independent, responsible, and familiar with the area. Walking home alone was something she'd done before. It wasn't out of the ordinary. Carlie was a 6th grade student at McIntosh Middle School. She lived with her mother, Susan Chopin, her stepfather, and her younger sister. Her parents described her as sweet, funny, and artistic. She loved animals, had a habit of doodling on everything she could get her hands on, and dreamed of one day becoming a veterinarian. Like many girls her age, she had a collection of friendship bracelets, favorite songs scribbled in notebooks, and a personality that lit up every room she entered. That Sunday, Carlie left her friend's home on Lockwood Ridge Road shortly before 6 p.m. She wasn't in a rush. It was still daylight, and the walk home would only take her about 15 minutes. The route was simple. Walk south along Lockwood Ridge, cross Bee Ridge Road, then turn toward her neighborhood. But Carlie, perhaps trying to shave a few minutes off the walk or simply taking the shortcut she often used, chose to walk behind a car wash located on Bee Ridge Road. The shortcut wasn't isolated. It sat in a semi-busy commercial area surrounded by small shops and roads, but in that moment, it was quiet. Still, there were no other people around. At approximately 6:21 p.m., a security camera mounted above the car wash caught a grainy black and white image of Carlie as she passed through the rear lot. Seconds later, another figure entered the frame. A man in a mechanic's uniform, tall, thin, with short hair and visible tattoos on his forearms. He didn't run. He didn't appear frantic. He walked up to her, paused, then calmly reached out and grabbed her arm. There was no visible struggle. Carlie didn't scream. The man gently pulled her toward the side of the building and led her out of frame. It all happened in under 10 seconds. At home, when Carlie hadn't arrived by 6:30 p.m., her mother began to worry. She started calling friends, checking to see if maybe Carlie had stayed a little longer without letting her know. When that turned up nothing, she began to drive around the neighborhood. By 7:05 p.m., Susan called the Sarasota County Sheriff's Office and reported her daughter missing. Deputies responded almost immediately.
What's your address, ma'am?
She's gone. We can't find her anywhere. I've called all her friends.
How old is she?
11.
Okay, what's her name, ma'am?
Carlie, C-A-R-L-I-E.
And last name?
Brucia, B-R-U-C-I-A.
From that moment, the case escalated quickly. Officers began retracing Carlie's route. They spoke to neighbors, friends, and local businesses. Volunteers were organized. Flyers were printed with her picture. 11 years old, 5 feet tall, 100 pounds, last seen wearing a pink shirt, blue jeans, and white Nike sneakers. Her hair was light brown, pulled into a ponytail. Her eyes hazel. As news of her disappearance spread, panic started to ripple through the community. This wasn't the kind of neighborhood where things like this happened. Sarasota was considered safe, and the idea that a young girl could vanish in broad daylight, just minutes from her home, was unthinkable. Local TV stations picked up the story almost immediately, and by Monday morning it was being covered statewide. Back at the car wash on Bee Ridge Road, detectives retrieved the surveillance footage from the manager, who hadn't initially thought anything of it until they explained what they were looking for. When investigators reviewed the footage and saw Carlie being led away, everything changed. The search was no longer for a missing child who may have wandered off. It was now an abduction. But in that moment, on the night of February 1st, no one knew that yet. What Susan knew was that her daughter hadn't come home. What her sister knew was that her best friend's bed was empty. What the people of Sarasota knew was that something was wrong, and time was already slipping away. The first 24 hours of any missing child case are the most critical. Law enforcement knows this. And in Carlie Brucia's case, the Sarasota County Sheriff's Office treated the situation with the urgency it deserved from the very beginning. Shortly after Susan Shorpen reported her daughter missing at 7:05 p.m. on February 1st, deputies were dispatched to canvass the area surrounding the Brucia home and the path Carlie was believed to have taken. Officers knocked on doors, spoke with neighbors, and began retracing the possible routes she might have used. Patrol cars swept the streets. Helicopters were not yet in the air, but the search was already gaining momentum. By nightfall, there was still no sign of Carlie. She hadn't been seen at her friend's house since she left shortly before 6 p.m., and no one had reported seeing her walking afterward. There were no calls, no messages, and no sign that she had run away. Her mother insisted this was completely out of character. Carlie wasn't the type to just disappear. Deputies expanded the search zone. Local residents were asked to check their sheds, garages, and backyards. Police dogs were brought in to follow her scent, but the trail vanished near the car wash on Bee Ridge Road. That was the first clue, a quiet one, that something was wrong in that exact location. The next morning, on Monday, February 2nd, detectives began contacting businesses along Bee Ridge Road, hoping to find anything useful. Store owners, gas stations, fast food chains, and car repair shops were asked if they had exterior security cameras. Most said no. But the owner of the car wash, a modest facility with 2 automatic bays and an office in the back, said yes. There was a single surveillance camera mounted outside the building, covering the back lot and a portion of the driveway. The feed wasn't monitored live. It recorded on a loop to a digital hard drive in the office. The system wasn't advanced and the resolution wasn't high, but it had been recording that evening. Detectives retrieved the footage and brought it back to the station. When the video was played, the room fell silent. The timestamp showed 6:21 p.m. The video showed Carlie walking briskly through the lot, heading toward the path that would take her home. Just seconds later, a man appeared from the left side of the frame. He was wearing what appeared to be a mechanic's uniform, a dark short-sleeved shirt and matching pants. His walk was calm, purposeful. He didn't run. He didn't grab her aggressively. He simply approached, stopped, and then reached out and took her by the arm. Without resistance, Carlie turned and began walking with him. They disappeared off-screen. The entire interaction lasted fewer than 10 seconds. The detectives reviewing the footage were stunned. It was rare to capture the exact moment of an abduction on video, and even rarer to see it unfold so quietly. There was no sound, no shouting, no struggle, just a calm, chilling moment that confirmed what everyone had feared. Carlie Brucia hadn't gotten lost or run away. She had been taken. Immediately, the footage was enhanced. The sheriff's office brought in experts, including digital forensic teams, to clean up the image and try to extract as much detail as possible. The man's face, his build, any identifying marks. The camera quality was low, but some things were obvious. He had short brown hair, a lean build, and visible tattoos on both forearms. The dark clothing and the patch on his shirt suggested a uniform. Maybe automotive, maybe HVAC, but clearly work attire. That same day, the case was elevated to a top priority, and outside agencies were called in. The FBI joined the investigation by midday. The Florida Department of Law Enforcement offered resources and support. NASA, yes, NASA, was asked to help enhance the surveillance footage using specialized imaging techniques. Everyone understood that time was critical. At a press conference held on Monday evening, the sheriff's office made a decision that would shape the case. They released the surveillance video to the public. News outlets across the country broadcast it immediately. The footage of Carlie being led away, a grainy black and white clip lasting just a few seconds, played in living rooms, restaurants, and news stations nationwide. For millions of people, it was the first time they'd ever watched an abduction in real time. The tip line exploded. More than 400 calls came in within the first 12 hours of the video's release. Some were vague, others were specific, but a pattern began to emerge. Multiple callers said they recognized the man in the footage. They gave a name, Joseph Smith. At the time, Smith was a 37-year-old Sarasota resident with a lengthy criminal history, including charges for kidnapping, false imprisonment, drug possession, and violence. He had been in and out of jail for years and had been released just months prior to Carlie's disappearance. He was living in the area with his brother, reportedly bouncing from place to place and struggling with heroin addiction. He matched the description almost perfectly. Lean build, mechanic's uniform, visible tattoos. Several acquaintances said they had seen him recently wearing clothes that looked exactly like the ones in the video. By Tuesday morning, February 3rd, just 2 days after Carlie went missing, Joseph Smith was on the radar as a prime suspect. Officers tracked him down and arrested him, not for the abduction, but for a probation violation, giving them legal grounds to hold him while they built the case. Despite the arrest, Smith refused to cooperate. He denied knowing anything about Carlie's disappearance. He asked for a lawyer. He didn't confess, at least not yet. As pressure mounted, the investigation intensified. Search teams returned to Bee Ridge Road, this time focusing not just on wooded areas, but on vacant lots, abandoned structures, drainage ditches, and wooded property behind buildings. The area was combed methodically, inch by inch. But Carlie was still missing, and everyone, from her family to the detectives working around the clock, knew that with every passing hour, the chances of finding her alive were growing smaller. By Wednesday, February 4th, 3 days since Carlie vanished, Joseph Smith was being held on unrelated charges, a probation violation stemming from previous offenses. Though he hadn't yet been charged in connection with Carlie's disappearance, detectives were building their case. The surveillance video remained the central piece of evidence. Analysts worked tirelessly to enhance the footage, stabilizing frames, clarifying tattoos, and attempting facial recognition. Meanwhile, the FBI worked alongside local authorities to re-interview witnesses, collect DNA samples, and dig deeper into Smith's movements in the days before and after Carlie was taken. Smith's criminal history became a growing concern. He was no stranger to law enforcement. At the time of Carlie's abduction, he was on probation for a drug-related offense, with a record that included kidnapping, battery, false imprisonment, and other charges dating back years. He had violated the terms of his probation multiple times, but had remained free. The public was outraged. Parents were terrified. The footage of Carlie being led away had played again and again on national news. And yet, 3 days later, her fate remained unknown. Then came the break. On Friday, February 6th, 5 days after Carlie disappeared, Joseph Smith was interrogated again by law enforcement. Details of the interrogation remain sealed, but it was during this questioning that Smith finally confessed. He admitted to abducting Carlie from the car wash, and he agreed to lead police to where she was. He did not say she was alive. Later that day, Smith took investigators to a wooded area behind the Central Church of Christ, located on Proctor Road, a quiet piece of property just 5 miles from where Carlie was last seen. The area was bordered by trees, a small clearing, and a utility shed. Behind the church, down a slight slope and partially concealed by brush, police found her body. Carlie Brucia was dead. She had been raped and strangled, then left in the woods, partially covered by leaves and debris. The location was less than 2 miles from Smith's residence. The discovery devastated the community. Hundreds of volunteers who had searched for days fell silent. Carlie's family was informed privately before the public announcement. Her mother, Susan Shorpen, collapsed when she heard the news. She later told reporters, "I didn't want this to be real. I kept hoping we'd find her walking somewhere. I didn't want to believe what my heart was already telling me." A memorial formed quickly outside the church. Flowers, stuffed animals, candles, and photos of Carlie surrounded the area. People who had never met her stood in tears. The entire town mourned. Joseph Smith was charged with kidnapping, sexual battery, and first-degree murder. Prosecutors announced almost immediately that they would seek the death penalty. The trial of Joseph P. Smith began in 2005, a year after the murder. The courtroom was packed. Reporters, legal observers, and members of the public filled every seat. Carlie's family sat front row every day. Her mother wore her daughter's necklace throughout the proceedings. The evidence presented by the prosecution was overwhelming. They showed the surveillance footage of Smith leading Carlie away. They introduced DNA evidence collected from Carlie's body that matched Smith. They showed fibers from her clothing found in Smith's car. Testimony from forensic experts, FBI agents, and local detectives painted a clear and horrifying picture of what happened that night. The defense tried to argue that the DNA evidence was circumstantial, that Smith was a drug addict with memory issues, and that no one had witnessed the actual murder. But it wasn't enough. The jury deliberated for just 13 hours before returning a guilty verdict on all counts. Joseph Smith was sentenced to death on March 15, 2005. Carlie's mother, Susan, wept as the sentence was read. Outside the courthouse, she told reporters, "There's no justice that can bring her back, but at least the world knows what he did, and maybe now he can't hurt anyone else." Smith remains on Florida's death row to this day. His appeals have been denied repeatedly. Carlie Brucia's case became one of the most widely publicized child abductions of the early 2000s. The fact that her kidnapping was caught on camera and that the public watched it unfold changed the way the nation viewed missing children cases. The video footage itself became a rallying point for public safety advocates. It led to discussions around child abduction response protocols, probation enforcement, and surveillance infrastructure. Many called for stricter monitoring of violent offenders, especially those with repeated parole violations like Smith. In Florida, the case reinvigorated the Amber Alert system, prompting law enforcement to respond more quickly in similar cases. It also inspired other states to reconsider how they tracked sex offenders and high-risk parolees. In 2012, Carlie's mother, Susan Shorpen, who had fought for victims' rights in the years after her daughter's death, was found dead in her bed at age 46. Her death was ruled an accidental drug overdose. Friends and family said she had never fully recovered from the trauma of losing Carlie. She had struggled emotionally, and though she tried to keep going, the pain was always present. Carlie Brucia is still remembered today. Her face, captured forever in that haunting footage, reminds us of the unimaginable. But her story also reminds us why we fight to protect children, why we must hold predators accountable, and why silence in the face of suspicion can be deadly. Each year, on the anniversary of her death, a candlelight vigil is held in her memory. At the place where she was found, people still leave flowers and messages. Her name remains on the lips of those who remember how quickly a life can be taken and how important it is that justice never sleeps. Carlie Brucia's story is one we won't forget, and we'll continue sharing cases like this to honor the victims and bring awareness to the truths behind these tragedies. If this story moved you, let us know your thoughts in the comments below. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you never miss another case. And if you're ready for the next story, one even more unbelievable, click here to watch it now.